Okay, very good morning to everyone. Am I audible? If you can hear my voice, please
Yes,
write
sir.
in the write in the chat
Sir.
box. Yeah, good, great. Okay, so we stopped last time at a point where minions were playing an important role. And we understood that it is not just we communicate with each other, but also we communicate with ourselves. And that makes the communication more interesting. And that's what we looked at on this slide. And we try to understand what meaning we try to derive from the shared communication messages. Okay, so we move on with this understanding that everybody is on the same page, and we will look at today what are the components of communication and which component is what and how important each of these components are while we communicate with each other. Okay, there is a question, I think. Yes, Meet, I'm audible. Thank you very much. So, hope you remember something related to what we discussed. And we said that if you don't understand anything, we just don't take it granted that I and others are sharing the same meaning. If you don't share the same meaning, we need to communicate through questions, clarifications, right? And today we'll look at the essentials of communication components. So on your left side, I have listed 8 major components, and it starts with source, message, channel, receiver, feedback, environment, context, and interference. We'll look at all of them one by one, but before we move on, let me ask you a question. What do we mean by the first component, source? Do you have any idea what do we mean by source? You can use chat box.
Any material.
Okay, any material, okay. Anything else? Okay, when we talk of communication and its source, we mean that from where the message initiated. That means, where does the message come from? So we'll try to understand through this chart, which you will be able to see step by step. So the source of communication, the first element, the source is a person. Now, there are different sources. You can say that I am a source of communication right now, but if a college is communicating to you, college becomes a source. For example, if a CVM is communicating to its employees, that means the CVM university becomes the source of communication. That means the person or the institution or a group of people sending message or initiating a message would become a source or sender. So they send a source in a particular environment. Now we will talk about environment in detail later on, but environment in brief to understand is the kind of atmosphere we live in. Environment, not in the sense of environmental sciences, but the place where I'm starting to deliver the message or starting to think about a message. So if you are in a classroom right now, our classroom becomes an environment. Now you see me standing in the classroom, and behind me, this is a whiteboard. So this whiteboard again is a part of environment. If you're able to see behind me a maroon board where you can stick notice board, that is also a part of room, that is the environment. Then near there is small almirah, so that is also part of environment. The fan which is moving above my head is also part of the environment. The way I stand in front of you is also a part of environment, and my appearance, so is your appearance, right? So environment includes any physical properties that you can see and touch. The podium on which my laptop stands is furniture, but still it's a part of the environment through which we all try to interact. Any questions on this so far? Okay, so the next is the context. In which context we all are trying to initiate the process of communication. We try to talk. Right now, our context is to understand the essential components of communication. Suppose I am coming to your house and I want to talk about your experiences of Zoom classes. That would become our context. If I am trying to contact your parents regarding your absence, that would become a context. If I'm trying to talk about results that you have got after the first internal examination, that will become the context, right? So the context is formal context. But if I just come to your house and say, hi, hello, how are you? And I just inquire about your likes and dislikes. So the context becomes informal, right? So in the same way, if the context changes, the environment also changes. Your home becomes the environment. The furniture at your home becomes a part of that environment. The sofa set, the television set, whether it's a switched on or off, becomes the part of the environment. How important is the environment? We will talk about it later when we talk about the eighth element, right? Okay, now once a communicator, the sender, the person who is in the center near the context, thinks that he wants to send a message. So the first thing he will do is to choose a channel. We'll talk about different channels. So if I want to talk about you formally, I may write you an email, a formal kind of communication, which you are supposed to show to your parents and get a signature or a respond, because it's a formal communication. But I'm trying to reach you. Email, nobody checks email regularly as compared to WhatsApp. So I may send you a WhatsApp and I need immediate response. And what you will do, will say, okay, sir, or it's a night, sir, 11 o'clock night. Ilsats doesn't work on night. So thank you very much for pointing me out that. So these are the channels. I may write to you in a later format. I may come to you, or you may form a group, a WhatsApp group, and then you will try to communicate. So there are different ways of channels, whether it's a written form or it's a spoken form. I may call you immediately if I want to get your attention urgently. Then I will talk to you over the phone, because I know that you will be available on a particular time. So that makes the choice of channel dependent on the urgency of the sender's message, what it wants at the end of the process of the communication. Any questions so far? Okay, So I will choose a channel and then I'll try to formulate a message. Okay, I want to talk about meat on an issue related to, let's say, a freshers party. This is what I'm thinking right now. So I will formulate a message. Okay, the best way to reach to this student is over phone, and he replies instantly. So based on my choice of channel and urgency, I will formulate a message. I will think, what am I going to talk to meet? So I will form a message. Once the message is designed in my mind, the content of the message, then I'll deliver it to meet. And meet will receive that message. Somebody, okay. Meet will receive the message and he will try to understand what I want to say. And once that understanding is shared, he would have his own context. Now, remember, when a sender and receiver exchange the message, the context must be same. If the contexts are different, the meaning of the message would be different. Similarly, the environment in which I'm talking may affect how Meet is going to understand the message. How he is going to, I'm not using the technical words, encode and decode, we'll come to that later on. So Meet will understand the message based on his context, his environment, and then what he will do, he will try to understand if there is no interference. Now, interference means noise. The elements which allows us not to understand the message as clearly as possible shared by sender. So the noises, the interferences or obstacles or barriers are many. That includes a disturbance in the noise, a disturbance in the sense of psychological or language barriers. We will talk about it later when we talk of interference or obstacles or barriers to communication. This will allow me to understand message in the given interference. If there is a poor communication line between me, between Meet and me, the problem would be Meet won't be able to understand the message entirely. And therefore, we need to understand how to reduce these obstacles, these interferences, these barriers to minimum level. Now, when we talk, we will later on, we will understand that how can we reduce the barriers to minimum level. And there are certain barriers like language barriers. If I start speaking in Telugu, might be difficult for half of you to understand. If I start speaking in Sindhi, which is my second language, when I go to my in-laws, you would find it difficult to understand. If I start speaking in Hindi, some of you may understand, some of you may not understand. Even the current choice of my language is a kind of barrier to some of you who would find it difficult to understand what I'm trying to deliver. इसीलिए जब हम बात करते हैं तो हमें ये बहुत ख्याल रखना है कि हम जो लैंग्वेज बोल रहे हैं, जो लेवल पे बोल रहे हैं, वो लेवल और रिसीवर का लेवल एक समान होना चाहिए. शशि थरूर हमसे जब बात करते हैं तो ही टॉक्स नॉर्मली, वो अपनी भाषा में बात करते हैं, लेकिन उनका जब लेवल बढ़ जाता है, when he talks with a certain amount of vocabulary, it would be difficult. हमें बहुत सारी दिक्कतें आती हैं, ये समझ में नहीं आया. Then you have to sit with a dictionary to understand what does he mean. So language barrier हो सकता है. कुछ लोग होते हैं जिनको अंग्रेजी बिल्कुल नहीं आती है. इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि वो समझ नहीं पा रहे, उनकी समझ में कुछ कमी है, लेकिन लैंग्वेज इटसेल्फ वो एक बैरियर है, एक ऑब्स्टेकल है जो सभी के लाइफ में कहीं ना कहीं किसी स्टेज पर इम्पैक्ट करता है। तो हमें ये समझना है कि जो सोर्स है और जो रिसीवर है, वो दोनों का एनवायरनमेंट सही होना चाहिए, दोनों का कॉन्टेक्स्ट सही होना चाहिए, जो मैसेज डिलीवर कर रहा है उसकी भाषा, उसका साइकोलॉजिकल स्टेट। आप एक बात समझ लीजिए, साइकोलॉजिकल स्टेट से मैं क्या कहना चाहता हूँ। मैं बारिश में भीग के आया हूँ, मैं बहुत रश में आया हूँ, मेरी फैमिली में कुछ इश्यू है, छत से पानी गिर रहा है और मुझे अभी क्लास लेना पड़ रहा है, तो मुझे ये नहीं सोचना पड़ेगा कि मेरे घर पे सब ठीक है और मैं वही कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आपसे बात करूंगा। ये नहीं हो सकता है। कहीं ना कहीं मेरे दिमाग में ये बात चलती रहती है कि घर पे क्या चल रहा होगा। मेरे पापा हॉस्पिटल में हैं, तो उनकी तबीयत कैसी है, तो वो भी असर करता है। जैसे अभी मैं कोई फिल्म देखने गया हूँ और मेरे 2-3 फ्रेंड्स क्लासरूम में हैं, तो वो जो क्लासरूम में मेरे फ्रेंड्स बैठे हैं उनके दिमाग में भी ये चल रहा होगा, ये फिल्म कैसी होगी, वो कब रिव्यू देगा। तो आपको वो क्यूरियोसिटी रहती है। साइकोलॉजिकल स्टेट्स, मेंटल ब्लॉकेजेस आर क्रिएटेड, हमारा दिमाग ये क्रिएट कर देता है। भूख लगी है फॉर एग्जाम्पल, हम थक गए हैं फॉर एग्जाम्पल, तो हम वो इफेक्टिव कम्युनिकेशन देने में शायद कैपेबल नहीं हो सकते। जरूरी नहीं है कि हम जो स्टेट में है रिसीवर भी वही स्टेट में है। यही लागू पड़ता है जब रिसीवर मैसेज कन्वे करता है, तो सोर्स भी वही स्टेट में हो, जरूरी नहीं है। आपने फिल्मों में देखा होगा, रियल लाइफ में भी आपने देखा होगा कि कोई बहुत ही जल्दी में होता है, अपना मैसेज जल्दी से डिलीवर करना चाहता है, क्योंकि उसके दिमाग में बहुत सारी बातें चलती रहती है। ही इज अंडर स्ट्रेस में है, तनाव में है, तो वो कैसे रिएक्ट करता है, वो कैसे बात करता है। आप लोगों ने सुना होगा, आप बोलते होंगे, कोई थक के आया है तो आप बोलते होंगे अभी एक मिनट सांस ले ले, आराम से बैठ और बाद में बात कर। तो आपको पता चलता है कि इंटरफेरेंस बहुत ही ज्यादा तरीके से आपके सेंडर और रिसीवर के बीच में बहुत ही बड़ा अंतर खड़ा कर सकता है। और हमें ये देखना है कि इंटरफेरेंस को, बैरियर्स को हम कैसे मिनिमम करें। क्यों करना है? क्योंकि अगला जो काम है रिसीवर का, वो ये है कि वो अपना मैसेज, सेंडर का मैसेज सुन के कुछ फीडबैक दे। अगर आपको प्रश्न पूछा गया है तो आप या तो जवाब देंगे, या तो हाथ खड़ा करेंगे, या तो कहें, या तो अपना मुंडी हिलाएंगे, यस हमें आता है, यस हमें आता है। अगर नहीं आता है तो आप ना कहेंगे। कोई बहुत ही एक्टिव है तो बुक का पेज देखेगा कि ये चैप्टर में से कहाँ पे आंसर मिलेगा मुझे। कोई गूगल यूज करेगा। तो क्वेश्चन जब आपको पूछा गया है सेंडर की तरफ से, तो रिसीवर इमीडिएटली अटेम्प्ट्स टू रिस्पॉन्स। अभी जो रिस्पॉन्स होता है ना, वो वर्बल भी हो सकता है, नॉन वर्बल भी हो सकता है, लेकिन उसको होना जरूरी है। क्योंकि अगर फीडबैक नहीं होगा तो कम्युनिकेशन का जो प्रोसेस है ना, वो पूरा नहीं होगा। फीडबैक मिलने पे ही आप कह सकते हो कि कम्युनिकेशन इज अ टू वे प्रोसेस। एक बाजू से आपको मैसेज मिलता रहे और दूसरी तरफ से आपको कोई उसका रिस्पॉन्स नहीं मिलेगा, तो वो प्रोसेस इनकम्प्लीट कहा जाएगा। आपके घर में भी आपने देखा होगा कि मम्मी डांटती रहती है या पापा डांटते हैं, कुछ बोलते हैं, कुछ सजेशन देते हैं। वी आर वेरी बिजी, अपने मोबाइल में बैठे रहते हैं, वी ट्राई टू चैट, फाइंड आउट समथिंग रिलेटेड टू आवर इम्पोर्टेंस, नॉट द इम्पोर्टेंस ऑफ द मैसेज बीइंग डिलीवर्ड। तो वहां पे आप फीडबैक नहीं दे रहे हो। सुन भी रहा है या नहीं, अपने को ये सांभळे छे कि नहीं, अपने को ये सुनने को मिलता है। सुन रहा है तू, मैं क्या कर रही हूँ, समझ में आ रहा है? इफ यू आर नॉट रिसीविंग दिस स्टेटमेंट, दैट मीन्स योर channels of communication as a receiver is working, right? यहां तक कोई प्रश्न है तो आप मुझे पूछ सकते हैं. You can ask me any question up to this and then we move on. Okay, so let's talk when a receiver is trying to give feedback on the message received, he becomes sender. So now the role is reversed, right? So our receiver becomes sender. He or she will decide what kind of channels he or she is going to use. मैंने आपको फोन किया है तो आप मुझे फोन पे ही बताएंगे. आप ये भी कह सकते हैं सर मैं आपको बाद में बताता हूँ, शायद मैं टेक्स्ट करता हूँ या व्हाट्सएप करता हूँ. Then you are taking a different way to communicate. You are taking your time to talk about whatever the message is given to you. So आप एक बार चैनल ढूंढेंगे, नहीं नहीं मुझे लगता है कि आई एम फाइन, फोन पे ही बात करते हैं, एंड यू से ओके सर आई एम फाइन, मुझे कल कॉलेज आने में कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, मैं आ जाऊंगा, आपको 11 बजे मिलूंगा. सो दैट्स द इमीडिएट फीडबैक यू गिव टू द सेंडर हु हैज कम्युनिकेटेड अ मैसेज टू यू. सो you become sender, you decide what channel you are going to use, and then again there are interferences. Again there is a message decoding and encoding, and then the sender who was initially was sending you message now becomes receiver, and then he or she gives you feedback. So this is the entire process of communication where you have tried to learn essential components of communication. If you have any questions, I'll stop here for a while and ask you if you have any doubts or comments or suggestions or examples that you demonstrate that you have understood these processes and as well as essential components of communication. So over to you for a couple of minutes. You can use chat box as well, and you can unmute yourself and respond to what I have communicated to you. Okay, so I guess there are no questions so far because I am not hearing any voices. So let's move on to what the environment is. Yes, I have got one. Sir, due to my internet connection issues, I have missed the essential components of communication. Will you upload this on YouTube? Of course, I'll do that, Princey, don't worry. Thank you. Okay, so let's understand the first element of communication, and that is the environment. The environment is the atmosphere, physical as well as psychological, where you send and receive messages. Right now, our environment is internet. And as Princey has rightly said, that she has a problem with the environment right now. What environment we are talking? We are talking of a virtual environment where she is not able to receive the message that I am trying to communicate through this class. So Zoom is a kind of virtual space that we all are in, and she is not able to get into that environment. But then there is an alternate environment for her that the virtual space is giving us. So environment is any physical and psychological atmosphere where you send and receive messages, right? So it can be a room, a virtual space, and appearance. Appearance, if you are in the right now class, you can see the classroom in which you are supposed to sit with projector, fans, windows, and benches. So these are making the room like a classroom. So the appearance of the room, the physical appearance of the room makes an impact the way we communicate. Suppose you are sitting on the first row of the benches, you would be receiving my message differently than if you are sitting at the back of the class, right? So if I'm using not this Zoom virtual environment, I would be projecting all these slides on whiteboard where you can see the zoomed images. So these will create an environment in which we receive. Suppose I prefer to sit in the garden and deliver a lecture in the garden. The entire way, the way we communicate will be different. You will be sitting on the grass, on the floor. You will be having a natural light. You will have natural air. You will have birds chirping. You will have butterflies flying in the class and going out the class. And there may be some stray dogs that can come and sit near you, or they might be looking at you. They might be barking. We don't know. But that environment, that appearance, that atmosphere will change the process, the communication process entirely. You can imagine in ancient times, the guru used to sit on a Vyas feet and he would deliver a lecture under a banyan tree, and all the students would be sitting on the floor, on the land. That would be different. So environment is very important because that will also create an impact on what you are going to speak and say and receive. So we'll talk about context later, but let's talk about source. Now, we do have talked about source. So these are some of the questions that you need to answer. And they are simple questions. Not all the questions are difficult. Either you say yes or no, except the first question. What does the source do first? If you remember, the way I started my session, I started with wishing you good morning. So the first thing the source does is to have an initial interaction with the audience. So he or she tries to make an eye contact and try to understand what kind of audience is present. So the first thing the source does is to analyze your verbal and non-verbal responses. And from that, the speaker will understand what kind of energy, what kind of understanding, what kind of enthusiasm the audience has. Suppose the students don't have enthusiasm, then the speaker will try to create enthusiastic atmosphere in the class. He will infuse some verbal expressions that energizes the entire audience. So source is the speaker, right? So is the source speaker? Yes. So these are all 1 mark questions can be asked in MCQs. Does the source convey new information with the audience? What do you think? Does the source convey new information with the audience?
Yes, sir.
Not always.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good, very good. Not always new information. There is always a mix of new and old information. Suppose I start the session with the essential components of communication without giving you the background of what we did in the past couple of sessions. Those who come to the class will have difficulty. Okay, what do you mean by this intrapersonal communication? If I start with that, you might not be able to understand. So it is always a good idea to combine new information with the old information. And it is always a good habit to start with the old information. And then you move on to the new information. So the speaker, the source, will convey you mix of two things, right? Old information and the new information. Okay? Does the source convey message through tone of voice, body language, and choice of clothing? What do you think?
Yes, it does.
How?
So, for example, like if you are speaking in a monotonous voice,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be able to capture the student's attention as much as you do when you pause or when you emphasize on certain words. And if you are in a classroom where you can actually see the students, when you use your hands, you are moving around, it actually helps to maintain the attention that you need in the class. Yes.
Okay. Does the choice of clothing also makes a statement, make a statement while the speaker, the source, is trying to convey the message?
Sir, the choice of clothing only comes when it is the drama, play, or any movie. But if we are in the virtual environment or in the telephonic conversation, the tone of voice only impacts the conversation, not the body language, choice of clothing, and others.
Okay, so do you mean to say that in face-to-face conversations, the choice of clothing makes an impact? Otherwise, in virtual environment like this, the choice of clothing is negligible, that you can neglect, right? That's what you want to say.
Sir, it depends on the environment.
Okay.
If you are a teacher and student
Yeah.
in college, then
Yeah.
the choice of clothing doesn't matter.
Okay, okay. So, do you mean to say that if I come in a sando in the classroom, in a virtual classroom, will you accept me as a teacher?
No, not like that.
So, and the similar is the case with the audience. If all the students come in their old pajamas, will I accept them in the virtual classroom as the students? No, certainly not. So wherever you are, when you are in a formal setting, or even in informal settings, the choice of clothes makes a huge statement. What kind of inputs you want your appearance to give to the message. I can wear whatever I like, but it should suit the context and the environment. If it does not, my message would be read differently. Okay?
Yes.
Okay. Does the source first determine what to convey and how to convey the message? सोर्स पहले डिसाइड कर लेता है कि मुझे क्या कहना है और कैसे कहना है, ये पहले से ही डिसाइड करता है या एक बार शुरू करने के बाद होता रहता है ये?
नहीं, पहले से डिसाइड होता है सर.
ओके, ऐसा क्यों होता है?
It's a mix of yes and no.
Yeah, okay. Can you come one by one, because it would be difficult for me to hear all the voices at the same time. Yeah, I think Niyati, you can go on.
Sir, it depends on the situation where we are sharing the source.
Okay, so if I'm sharing the information with my close friends, do I decide what I want to convey and मुझे कैसे convey करना है message? ये पहले होता है या बाद में होता है या instant हो जाता है?
Sir, talking to a friend is actually, we do not need to think actually. So we can speak what we think in our mind.
Okay.
But formally, if we want to say something, we need to think and work on it.
Okay. So let me take this word think. तो क्या हम जब सोचते हैं, think करते हैं, तो हम ये determine नहीं करते हैं अपने friends के साथ कि हमें क्या कहना है ना?
We think actually the topic.
Okay, whatever the topic is, without thinking what to say, मुझे नहीं लगता है कि कोई भी human being would jump to say without having any idea what they want to convey. So पहले कहीं भी कोई भी context है, कोई भी environment है, हम सोचते हैं मतलब इतना थोड़ा कॉन्टेक्स्ट पे भी डिपेंड करता है कि मुझे क्या कहना है, लेकिन कैसे कहना है ना, वो भी बहुत ही मायने रखता है। सो सोर्स पहले सोचता है व्हाट टू से, और उसके बाद वो डिसाइड करता है कि मैं कैसे कहूँ। It's like proposing toast for a group of friends that you went for a party. It's a birthday. आप किसी का बर्थडे है और टोस्ट प्रपोज करते हैं कि हैप्पी बर्थडे टू यू एंड दिस इज वंडरफुल फॉर द वंडरफुल फ्रेंड आई हैव। तो ये जो आप सेंटेंस बोलते हैं कि हैप्पीएस्ट बर्थडे टू द वंडरफुल फ्रेंड आई हैव, आपको फ्रेम करना पड़ता है कि ये शब्द मैं यूज करूंगा, इसको मैं पूरा सेंटेंस में बोलूंगा या इनकम्प्लीट छोड़ दूंगा, मैं इसे थोड़ा एनर्जी से बोलूंगा, मैं इसे थोड़ा गा के भी बोलूंगा, मैं उसके साथ खड़े रह के भी बोलूंगा, मैं अपना जो सॉफ्ट ड्रिंक का ग्लास है वो मैं रेज करूंगा। तो पूरा जो आपका दिमाग और बॉडी, शरीर दो है, वो एक बन के कुछ कन्वे करने की कोशिश करते हैं। And that's why the question is very important. The source first decides what to say and how to say, whatever the context. अब आप घर जब अपने पापा मम्मी से या फ्रेंड से बात करेंगे या अपने टीचर से बात करेंगे, तो अपने आप को ऑब्जर्व कीजिए। जब आप कुछ कहना चाहते हैं तो आपका जो प्रोसेस है वो क्या चलता रहता है। सी, मैंने आपको पहले भी बताया था, एक ही मिनट बाकी, आई विल नॉट बी एबल टू फिनिश द सेंटेंस आई थिंक। तो जब हम बोलते हैं ना, तो बहुत सारी प्रोसेसेस एक साथ चलती रही। मुझे क्या कहना है, कैसे कहना है, किसको कहना है, कैसे कहूंगा, कौन सा शब्द यूज करूंगा, all that matters and makes your communication a package, and you deliver that package, and the person who receives may